The stars above New Eden shine brightly, painting a peaceful picture in the vastness of space. The Terran colony, located on the edge of known space, was home to millions of humans, scientists, engineers, farmers, ordinary people who had left Earth in search of a new life. It was supposed to be a paradise, a symbol of humanity's future. But that night, paradise turned into a nightmare. A massive shadow spread across the sky as hundreds of alien warships emerged from the void. They came without warning. They came without mercy. The earth-shattering, an unknown alien species, descended upon New Eden like hungry predators. Their ships were sleek, black, and covered in glowing red symbols. As they entered the planet's orbit, death followed. The attack begins. The first explosions hit before the colony's defense systems even detected the enemy. Fire rained from the sky, striking cities and settlements with brutal precision. Entire buildings crumbled, vehicles flew through the air, and terrified people ran for their lives. Colonel David Carter, the head of New Eden's defense forces, watched in horror from his command center. Red warning lights flashed all around him as alarms screamed in his ears. Reports poured in from all over the planet. The colony was being destroyed. "We're being wiped out," a young officer shouted. "They're hitting everything. Military bases, communication towers, even hospitals." Colonel Carter clenched his fists. This wasn't an invasion. This was extermination. He activated the emergency broadcast system. "To all citizens of New Eden, find shelter immediately. This is not a drill. This is an attack. Defense teams, engage the enemy with everything you have." Fighter squadrons launched from underground hangars, racing into the sky to meet the invaders. But the earth-shattering warships were faster, stronger, and far more advanced. Within minutes, dozens of human fighters were reduced to burning debris. Titan's Wrath enters the fight. Far away, deep in space, a lone warship received New Eden's distress call. The Titan's Wrath, the pride of the Terran fleet, was the most powerful warship ever built by humanity. Massive, heavily armed, and equipped with cutting-edge AI, it had never lost a battle. Captain Ethan Graves stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold on his screen. His jaw tightened as he saw that earth-shattering reducing New Eden to ash. "Those bastards, they didn't even give us a warning." His second-in-command, Commander Ryan Cole, turned to him. "Sir, the colony won't survive much longer. We have to act now." Graves nodded. "Prepare for emergency warp. We're going in." The Titan's Wrath rumbled as its engines roared to life. Within seconds, the massive warship disappeared into hyperspace, heading straight for the battle. A desperate fight. Back on New Eden, the situation was hopeless. Colonel Carter's forces were nearly wiped out. The earth-shattering moved like ghosts, slaughtering anyone who resisted. In the burning streets, a young girl, Lena, clutched her mother's hand as they ran from the chaos. Screams and gunfire filled the air. Above them, alien dropships landed, releasing tall, insect-like warriors with glowing red eyes. Lena's mother stumbled, falling to the ground. A earth-shattering soldier raised its weapon, preparing to fire. And then, boom! A massive explosion shook the ground as a powerful energy blast tore through the earth-shattering forces. The air crackled with blue lightning as a thunderous roar filled the sky. Titan's Wrath had arrived. The colossal warship descended from the heavens, its massive cannons already firing. In a single barrage, hundreds of earth-shattering ships were vaporized. The invaders, who had been slaughtering humans without resistance, suddenly found themselves outmatched. On the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, Captain Graves stared at the battlefield with cold determination. "You wanted war. Well, now you've got one." The turning point. The Titan's Wrath unleashed wave after wave of destruction. Earth-shattering forces, once unstoppable, began to retreat. For the first time since the attack began, hope returned to New Eden. Colonel Carter's voice came through the comms, desperate but relieved. "Titan's Wrath. Thank God you're here." They're taking prisoners. We don't know why." Graves frowned. "Prisoners? Why would they do that if they wanted us dead?" And then something changed. A strange energy signal pulsed from the acceleratory mothership. In an instant, the alien forces stopped retreating. They regrouped. A new voice echoed through the Titan's Wrath's communication system, a deep, cold voice that sent chills down the crew's spines. "Humanity, you should have stayed hidden. Now you will suffer." Captain Graves narrowed his eyes. Who the hell is this? The acceleratory warship suddenly changed formation, charging straight toward Titan's Wrath. "Sir," Athena, the ship's AI, spoke urgently. "I am detecting a massive energy buildup in the enemy fleet. This is not over." Graves exhaled sharply. "All hands, prepare for the real fight." The battlefield was far from quiet. Titan's Wrath hovered over the burning colony like a guardian from the heavens. Its enormous cannons glowed with energy, sending devastating blasts through the enemy fleet. The acceleratory, who had attacked with such arrogance, now found themselves on the defensive. Their sleek black ships, once untouchable, now burst into flames as Titan's Wrath carved through their ranks. But Captain Ethan Graves knew this was just the beginning. He stood on the bridge, watching the enemy formation shift. The acceleratory were adapting, regrouping faster than expected. His sharp eyes locked onto the giant mothership at the heart of the invasion, a massive fortress-like structure hovering in orbit. It wasn't attacking. It was watching. A deep voice echoed through the comms, cold and emotionless. "Humanity, you were not supposed to resist." Graves felt the tension on his bridge rise. Every crew member froze, waiting for his response. He narrowed his eyes and stepped forward. "Who am I speaking to?" he asked. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the voice returned. "You are insignificant." Without warning, the acceleratory fleet unleashed a counterattack. Hundreds of enemy ships charged forward, their weapons lighting up the void. Titan's Wrath's shields flared as plasma blasts rained down. Explosions shook the ship, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Shields at 70%. Athena, the AI, reported. "They're trying to overwhelm us." Graves didn't flinch. "Let them try." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the closest destroyers. Hit them hard." Titan's Wrath roared to life, its railguns and energy cannons firing in a synchronized pattern. One by one, acceleratory ships exploded, torn apart by the sheer power of human engineering. But something was wrong. Commander Ryan Cole, his second in command, studied the tactical display. His expression darkened. "Sir, this isn't a retreat." Graves frowned. "Explain." Cole pointed at the readings. "They're not falling back. They're hurting us." Graves's stomach tightened. It was a trap. A sudden, massive energy surge erupted from the acceleratory mothership. A strange blue vortex opened in space, swallowing dozens of their own ships. Then, without warning, a new fleet emerged. These ships were different. Larger, more advanced. Their designs were sleeker, with glowing veins of energy pulsating across their hulls. Unlike the first wave, these ships moved in perfect unison, as if controlled by a single mind. Athena's voice cracked through the speakers. "Warning. Unknown vessels detected. Their energy readings. Captain, these ships are not acceleratory." A cold chill ran through Graves. "Then who the hell are they?" The deep voice returned, now filled with amusement. "You have proven yourselves interesting." The new fleet opened fire. Titan's Wrath shook violently as the first barrage struck. The ship's powerful shields held, but only barely. The new enemy's weapons were far stronger than the acceleratories. Each hit sent shockwaves through the ship, causing consoles to spark and flicker. "Shields at 40%, Athena warned. Graves grabbed onto his command chair to steady himself. "Return fire. Full spread. Hit them with everything we have." Titan's Wrath's cannons lit up, sending streams of blue plasma and railgun slugs at the enemy fleet. Some of the new ships were destroyed, but others adapted, shifting their shields to absorb the attacks. It wasn't enough. Cole's face went pale. "Sir, we're outgunned." Graves gritted his teeth. He had never lost a battle. He wasn't about to start now. "Athena, find me a weakness." The AI responded instantly, analyzing. Their armor is regenerating at an abnormal rate. They are using an unknown energy source. Graves clenched his fists. "Then we take that energy source out." Athena's holographic form flickered, her expression unreadable. "Captain, that energy source is inside their mothership." Silence fell over the bridge. Cole was the first to speak. "You want to go inside their mothership? That's suicide." Graves exhaled slowly. "It's the only way." He turned to Lieutenant Area Blake, his best infiltration specialist. "Lieutenant, get your team ready. You're going in." Area nodded sharply, determination in her eyes. "Yes, sir." As the enemy fleet closed in, Titan's Wrath prepared for its most dangerous mission yet, a direct assault on the heart of the invasion. And deep within the excellenary mothership, something was waiting for them. Something far worse than they had ever imagined. A deep silence filled the bridge of Titan's Wrath as the crew processed the plan. The ship was still under heavy fire, its shields barely holding against the combined forces of the excellenary and their new unknown allies. The enemy's weapons were far beyond human technology, regenerating and adapting to every counterattack. There was no way to win this battle through brute force, which meant they had to take the fight inside. Captain Ethan Graves stood tall, his piercing gaze fixed on the massive alien mothership floating ahead. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a behemoth of shifting metal and glowing veins of pure energy, pulsing like a living creature. Somewhere deep inside that structure lay the key to the enemy's power. "Lieutenant Blake," Graves said, his voice steady, "this is a one-way trip. If we fail, there won't be a second chance." Lieutenant Area Blake stood at attention, her sharp blue eyes filled with determination. She had led dozens of Black Ops missions before, but this was different. "Understood, sir. My team is ready." Commander Ryan Cole shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, sending a team inside an enemy mothership is insane. We don't even know what's in there." Graves turned to face him. "We do know one thing. If we stay out here, we die." He motioned toward the enemy fleet. "If we want to survive, we hit them where it hurts." Cole exhaled and gave a stiff nod. "Then let's do this." The infiltration begins. Inside the launch bay, Lieutenant Blake's strike team stood ready in their armored exosuits. The team consisted of 6 of the best soldiers in the fleet, each one trained for high-risk missions. Sergeant Daunt Briggs, a towering man with arms like steel, loaded his plasma rifle. "We're going to make history today, boys and girls." Private Jace Monroe, the youngest on the team, adjusted his visor. "Or become history." Blake smirked. "Let's focus on staying alive, shall we?" The plan was simple, but deadly. Titan's Wrath would punch a hole through the enemy's defenses, just long enough for Blake's team to deploy. Their dropship, a stealth Black Raven, would fly through the chaos and land inside the mothership. Once inside, they had to find the power source and destroy it. No backup, no second chances. Graves's voice echoed through the comms. "Strike team, prepare for launch. We'll cover you as long as we can." Blake and her team strapped into the Black Raven as the hangar doors opened, revealing the chaos of battle outside. Enemy ships zipped through space, firing relentless barrages at Titan's Wrath. The battleship retaliated with massive energy blasts, taking down enemy fighters one by one. Go, go, go. The Black Raven launched, diving straight into the battlefield. Into the heart of the enemy. The dropship weaved between enemy fire, dodging plasma blasts and debris. Blake gripped her harness tightly as the ship shook violently. Evasive maneuvers, she barked. The pilot, a seasoned veteran named Maravos, grinned. Hold on tight. The Black Raven spiraled through the enemy formation, dodging a barrage of incoming fire. Titan's Wrath unleashed another devastating cannon blast, momentarily creating an opening in the enemy defenses. This was their chance. Now, Blake commanded. The dropship accelerated, breaking through the mothership's outer defenses and barreling toward a strange docking bay. The moment they entered, the ship's systems shut down. What the? Mara slammed the controls. We've lost power. The Black Raven crashed onto the alien docking platform, skidding across the smooth metallic floor before finally coming to a stop. Red warning lights flashed inside the cockpit. Blake unclipped her harness. Everyone, move. We're on a timer. The team stormed out of the ship, weapons ready. The air was thick with a strange humming energy, vibrating through their bones. The walls pulsed with an eerie blue light, as if the ship itself was alive. Then they heard it. A low, clicking sound, not mechanical, but organic. Monroe raised his rifle. Guys. From the shadows, they emerged. Tall, insect-like creatures with elongated limbs and glowing red eyes crawled across the walls and ceiling. Their sharp, serrated arms dripped with a thick black liquid. They weren't just fighting machines. The ship was full of living nightmares. Open fire, Blake shouted. The air exploded with gunfire as plasma rounds tore through the alien creatures. The creatures screeched, their bodies twisting unnaturally as they lunged at the soldiers. One soldier went down instantly, pulled into the darkness before he could even scream. Briggs swung his massive energy axe, cleaving through one of the creatures, its body melting into black sludge. Blake fired her pulse rifle, aiming for the glowing red eyes. One after another, the creatures fell, but more kept coming. They were endless. We need to move, now, Blake yelled. The team fought their way down a dark corridor, the walls shifting as if the ship was responding to their presence. They reached a large metallic door, pulsating with energy. The power source had to be inside. Blake placed a charge on the door. Stand back. With a deafening blast, the door burst open, revealing a massive chamber filled with glowing blue orbs. In the center, suspended in midair, was a pulsing core of energy. But they weren't alone. Standing in front of the core was a tall, humanoid figure, draped in black armor with glowing blue veins running through its body. Its face was smooth, featureless, except for two piercing white eyes. It turned slowly to face them. Then, in a voice that sent chills through their bones, it spoke. You should not have come here. The doors behind them slammed shut. The air inside the chamber felt wrong, heavy, charged with an eerie energy that made the soldiers' skin crawl. The massive pulsing core at the center of the room bathed everything in a haunting blue glow, casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. The humanoid figure in front of them stood motionless, its glowing white eyes locked onto the intruders. There was no anger, no fear, just an unsettling calmness, as if it had already calculated the outcome of this encounter. Lieutenant Blake tightened her grip on her rifle. Identify yourself, she demanded. The figure didn't move. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, studying them like a predator studying its prey. You are not supposed to be here, it said, its voice cold and mechanical, layered with something inhuman beneath it. Sergeant Briggs stepped forward, his massive energy axe humming in his grip. Yeah. Well, we don't really care. He gestured toward the core. We're shutting that thing down. The figure finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, it raised one hand, and the blue energy in the room intensified. The walls shimmered, and suddenly, the entire chamber came to life. Metal twisted, shifting into bladed appendages and spiked tendrils, reaching toward the soldiers. The floor beneath them rippled like liquid metal. It wasn't just a ship. It was a living entity. Fall back, Blake ordered, But it was too late. A massive metallic tentacle shot from the floor, wrapping around Monroe's leg. He screamed as it yanked him off his feet, dragging him toward the pulsating core. Briggs reacted instantly, bringing his axe down with a mighty swing, severing the tendril in a flash of energy. Monroe crashed to the ground, gasping. "They're trying to consume us," he yelled. Blake's mind raced. The mission was already falling apart, and they hadn't even touched the cord yet. The humanoid figure took a step forward, the blue veins across its body pulsing in sync with the core. "You do not understand what you are interfering with." Blake raised her rifle. "Try me." The creature lunged. Its speed was inhuman, covering the distance in an instant. Blake barely had time to react before it slammed into her, sending her crashing against the metallic wall. Sparks flew as she hit the ground hard, her armor absorbing most of the impact. Briggs and the others opened fire. Plasma rounds streaked through the air, but the figure moved like a shadow, dodging effortlessly. It blinked out of existence for a split second, then reappeared behind them. With an unnatural twist of its arm, it grabbed one of the soldiers, Corporal Vasquez, by the throat and lifted him off the ground. The moment its fingers touched him, Vasque screamed. His body convulsed violently, his armor melting into his skin as if being absorbed. Blake watched in horror as Vasquez's form withered away, his screams fading into nothing. Within seconds, there was nothing left but a few ashes floating in the air. The room fell into dead silence. The creature turned its glowing eyes back toward them. "Now you understand." Blake's mind raced. This wasn't just an enemy soldier. This thing, this entity, was something else entirely. It wasn't here to fight. It was here to assimilate. And if they failed, humanity wouldn't just lose the war. They would cease to exist. Briggs clenched his jaw. "We need to end this. Right now." Blake's eyes flicked toward the core. If that thing was connected to it, then destroying the core might be their only chance. But how? Titan's wrath was too far away to provide fire support. Their explosives weren't strong enough to take down something this advanced. They needed another way. Then she noticed something. Behind the pulsing core, embedded deep within the ship's structure, was something different. A black, spire-like construct, flickering with red energy instead of blue. It wasn't part of the ship's organic design. It was foreign. A weakness. Blake didn't hesitate. "Briggs, cover me." She sprinted toward the core, dodging shifting metal tendrils that lashed out at her. The creature reacted instantly, vanishing and reappearing in her path. But Briggs was faster. With a roar, he swung his axe, catching the creature in mid-teleport. The blade connected, slicing through its torso in a burst of blue fire. The humanoid staggered, its form glitching, but it wasn't dead. It was adapting. Blake dove forward, reaching the black spire. Up close, she could feel the energy radiating from it, unstable, chaotic. It was some kind of control system. Without thinking, she ripped a detonator from her belt and slapped it against the spire. "Everyone, get clear." The creature's head snapped toward her. Its white eyes widened in realization. No. Blake hit the detonator. A violent explosion ripped through the chamber. The core shattered, its energy surging outward in a blinding shockwave. The creature let out a piercing scream, its body disintegrating into thousands of particles, dissolving into the collapsing walls. The ship began to fall apart. "Move E!" Blake yelled as the team sprinted back toward the Black Raven. The walls around them twisted violently, the living metal collapsing in on itself. They barely made it to the dropship as the entire structure started imploding. Mara, their pilot, was already at the controls. "Hang on." The dropship blasted out of the docking bay just in time. Behind them, the massive alien mothership shuddered violently, its glowing veins turning red before finally erupting into a massive explosion. The shockwave rocked Titan's wrath, sending debris flying in every direction. On the bridge, Captain Graves watched as the massive enemy vessel was consumed in fire, its towering structure collapsing into nothingness. A silence followed. Then, the cheers erupted. Blake collapsed into her seat, breathing hard. Briggs let out a low chuckle, wiping the sweat from his brow. Monroe just stared out the window, watching the remains of the mothership drift into space. That was insane. Blake exhaled. Yeah, but it's not over yet. She knew the truth. The earth-shattering weren't the true threat. That thing inside the ship, the entity, was something else entirely. And somewhere out there, more like it were waiting. The wreckage of the earth-shattering mothership drifted through space like a graveyard of twisted metal. Fires still burned within the shattered remains, but Titan's wrath had already turned its attention elsewhere. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Blake sat in the debriefing room, staring at the holographic projection of the battle. Despite their victory, her mind was elsewhere. The creature, the thing inside the mothership, had spoken to her. It hadn't begged for its life. It hadn't fought with anger. It had spoken with certainty, like it knew something she didn't. Captain Graves entered the room, his usual commanding presence feeling heavier than before. He placed his hands on the table, eyes locked on the projection. That wasn't just a warship, he said finally. It was something else. Blake nodded. It was alive. Graves turned to her. We scanned the wreckage. The ship was built from organic material, but not nary. That thing you fought, it wasn't one of them. Blake's stomach tightened. Then what was it? Graves tapped the console, and a new projection appeared. A black spire-like structure. The same kind Blake had destroyed inside the ship. Only this one wasn't alone. There were hundreds of them. Thousands. And they weren't just in space. Some were buried deep beneath planetary surfaces. Others were lashed onto asteroids, moons, derelict ships. They were everywhere. We thought we were fighting the earth-shattering, Graves said grimly. But what if they were never in control? What if they were just puppets? A chill ran through Blake. She had assumed the war was about territory, about dominance. But now she wasn't sure if humanity had ever been the real target. An alert blared through the ship. A priority message flashed across the holo display. Emergency distress call. Colony planet Jericho Prime under attack. Immediate assistance required. Blake shot to her feet. Who's attacking? The AI's voice echoed through the room. Unknown entity. Does not match earth-shattering signatures. Energy readings are off the charts. Graves wasted no time. Battle stations. Set course for Jericho Prime. The Titan's wrath lurched forward, engines flaring as it jumped to faster than light travel. Jericho Prime. Orbital Vayu. The colony world burned. Flames stretched across its cities, massive plumes of black smoke rising into the atmosphere. Ships soared through the sky, locked in desperate dogfights, but the enemy wasn't using conventional warships. They were massive black constructs, shifting and twisting like liquid metal. They moved like living creatures, darting unpredictably, adapting to every attack. Human ships fired on them, but energy pulses bent around their forms, harmlessly dissipating. On the ground, things were even worse. The enemy didn't just kill. They absorbed. Blake watched in horror through the ship's viewport. Soldiers fired at the black creatures, but whenever one of them was touched, even for a second, they screamed as their bodies twisted and melted into the alien mass. Men and women vanished, their forms dissolving as they were pulled into the shifting black tide. And then, they stood back up. Only now, their eyes glowed white. Blake's hands clenched into fists. It was happening again. This wasn't an invasion. It was assimilation. Titan's wrath dropped into low orbit, and Graves turned to the crew. If we don't stop them here, they'll spread. His voice was grim. And this time, there won't be a next battle. Blake checked her weapons, her mind sharpening. The fight aboard the extraordinary warship had been brutal. But this was about survival. The dropships deployed. The final battle had begun. The dropship doors slid open, revealing a sky choked with smoke and fire. Jericho Prime, once a thriving human colony, was now a battlefield. The ground below was a twisted nightmare, black, pulsating, and shifting, as if the planet itself was alive. Blake gritted her teeth as the dropship descended. Around her, the squad prepared their weapons, but everyone knew the truth. Bullets weren't enough. They had seen what happened when soldiers fired at the enemy. The creatures adapted, consumed, and turned humans into their own. Graves' voice crackled through the comms. "Squad, listen up. We need to hit them at the source." Scans show a massive energy signature deep within the colony. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Blake checked her rifle. "So we take it out." "We take it out," Graves confirmed, "or we don't leave this planet." The dropship landed hard, the doors slamming open, and the horror truly began. Ground Leviel, Jericho Prime. They hit the dirt running. The colony was unrecognizable, a twisted fusion of human structures and alien corruption. Buildings had been pulled apart, their metal and stone woven into the dark, shifting mass that covered the streets. And the people. Blake's stomach turned. Some were still alive. Their bodies were half absorbed, stuck in the growing black structures like flies in amber. Their eyes flickered between human terror and something else, something not human. One of them, a soldier, reached out as they passed. "Help me," he whispered. And then his face twisted, his mouth stretching unnaturally as his voice shifted. "No, stay. Join us." Blake fired without hesitation. The corrupted soldier twisted and collapsed, his body dissolving into the black mass. "Keep moving," Graves barked. "We can't save them." They pushed forward, fighting through waves of twisted, shifting forms. Each enemy moved like liquid, dodging bullets, reforming, adapting. The squad switched to energy weapons, using high-voltage rounds to slow them down. But it wasn't enough. Blake heard a scream behind her. She turned just in time to see one of their own. Lieutenant Harris. Get grabbed. The black mass wrapped around him like tendrils, pulling him in. He thrashed, screamed, then stopped. And when he stood back up, his eyes were white. "Harris," Blake whispered. His face was calm. Too calm. Not human. Then he lunged. She barely dodged, firing a shot point blank. His body convulsed, but even as it fell, the black mass reformed, crawling back to life. They weren't killing them. They were delaying them. "Move. Now." Graves roared. They ran, deeper into the colony, towards the energy signature that pulsed like a heartbeat. The core. They reached the heart of the colony. And there, in the center of the chaos, it waited. A massive, shifting black spire, reaching into the sky, tendrils twisting and pulsing with unnatural energy. The ground around it was not solid. It was moving, crawling, alive. And standing beneath it were dozens of former humans. Soldiers, civilians, children, all standing in perfect silence. Blake's heart pounded. They were waiting. And then the spire spoke. Not with a voice, with a feeling, a presence. It pushed into their minds, filling their heads with a single, undeniable truth. You were never meant to survive. Blake gasped, clutching her helmet. The others staggered, some screaming. But Graves, he stepped forward, and he smiled. "That's where you're wrong." With a single command, the Titan's wrath, hovering in low orbit, fired. A planetary railgun blast, bright as a second sun, tore through the sky and struck the spire dead center. The shockwave ripped through the colony, sending corrupted forms shrieking as the energy disintegrated them. The ground tore apart, the black mass withering, breaking apart, burning. And for the first time since the battle began, the enemy screamed. Blake dropped to her knees, gasping for breath as the psychic pressure lifted. Around her, the squad regrouped, staring in shock as the spire crumbled. For the first time, it looked like they had won. But Blake wasn't so sure, because in the dying echoes of the spire's destruction, she could still hear it whispering. The sky over Jericho Prime was still burning. Even after the destruction of the spire, the air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. The ground beneath them, once a writhing mass of corruption, had stopped moving. But it hadn't disappeared. Blake stood among the ruins, gripping her rifle so hard her knuckles turned white. The blackened remains of the spire still hissed, steaming as if the planet itself was trying to heal. Around her, the squad moved cautiously, weapons raised. Something felt off. Graves walked up beside her, scanning the horizon. "It's not over." Blake exhaled. "I know." The Titan's Wrath was still in low orbit, running deep scans on the colony. The crew had expected to pick up signs of dying energy, of a weakened enemy. Instead, they had found something worse. The corruption wasn't dying. It was retreating. "We need to get out of here." Graves' voice was tense, his usual ironclad confidence cracking. Now, Blake had never heard fear in his voice before. That alone made her blood turn cold. The final warning. As the squad started moving back to the extraction point, a deep rumble shook the ground. The sky darkened. Not from smoke, not from fire, from something above them. Blake looked up and felt her stomach drop. The stars were disappearing. At first, she thought it was debris, a cloud of dust or wreckage from the battle. But then she realized it was moving. A shadow, a shape too massive to comprehend. And it wasn't just above Jericho Prime. It stretched across the sky, beyond the planet's atmosphere. It had been hiding there all along. A whisper crawled into her mind, a familiar, suffocating presence. Not words, just a single feeling. Regret. She knew, without understanding how, that the voice belonged to the spire, or rather, what had been controlling it. "We did not want war," the voice resonated, deep and ancient. "But you destroy our form. You burned our children. You left us no choice." Blake's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a fleet. It wasn't an army. It was something bigger, older, beyond human understanding. Graves' voice was hoarse. "Blake, move. Now." The Titan's Wrath called down urgently. Unknown object detected. Mass reading. The AI hesitated, as if trying to make sense of the impossible. "It is planetary in scale." The sky tore open. A piece of the shadow descended, breaking through the upper atmosphere like a black tidal wave. It wasn't just landing. It was consuming. Buildings collapsed instantly. The wreckage of human ships vanished as the mass absorbed everything in its path. The squad ran. Blake barely had time to react before something ripped through her mind. A surge of images, memories that weren't hers. Planets swallowed whole. Stars snuffed out. Civilizations that had fought, just like them, and lost. Humanity wasn't the first to face this enemy. And they wouldn't be the last. "You should not have resisted," the voice whispered. "You could have joined us." Blake clenched her teeth, forcing herself to keep running. No. If this thing thought humanity would bow, it was wrong. Titan's Wrath. Prepare an orbital strike. Graves barked into his comms. The AI responded instantly. "Captain, that will not stop it." Graves' jaw tightened. "Then we hit it harder." The warship shifted position, its cannons glowing as it prepared to unleash everything it had. But even as the weapons powered up, the shadow above them moved. A tendril of darkness, thicker than a mountain, lashed out toward the warship. In seconds, it would be over. Blake's heart pounded. Think. Think. She looked at the remains of the spire, at the cracks still glowing faintly from the Titan's previous blast. The energy wasn't gone. It was still connected. Blake turned to Graves. We can overload it. His eyes snapped to hers. That'll take out the entire colony. And if we don't, we lose everything. The captain's face hardened. Then he gave the order. The last gamble. Titan's Wrath adjusted its targeting. Instead of firing at the descending mass, it aimed directly at the ground. The spire. The heart of the infection. The crew didn't hesitate. A massive pulse cannon fired, striking the remains of the spire with unimaginable force. The ground cracked. The city erupted. A chain reaction spread like wildfire, igniting the deepest roots of the corruption. And for the first time, the shadow reeled back. It didn't scream. It didn't attack. It hesitated. Blake's comm crackled. Get to the extraction point, now. They ran for the dropship as the city collapsed behind them. The black mass dissolving into fire and light. The Titan's Wrath pulled them in just as the explosion engulfed everything. And then, silence. AFTRMATH. Jericho Prime was gone. Where there had once been a thriving colony, now only debris floated in space. Blake stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage. The warship's scanners picked up no signs of life, no signs of the corruption. Had they won? She wasn't sure. Graves turned to her. It hesitated. Blake nodded slowly. The shadow hadn't been destroyed. It had simply left. And that terrified her more than anything. Because now, they knew the truth. This war wasn't just about humanity. It had happened before. And it would happen again. The only question was, would they be ready when it returned?